Hi there, you're listening to the Steve Schramm Show, where we train Christians to become confident, passionate servants of Jesus so they can grow in their walk with God and share their faith more persuasively. Welcome to the show. So I recently came across an article online dealing with the subject of young earth creationism from a pretty popular apologist known as Rouser, the tentative apologist. Some of you listening might be familiar with him. And so he wrote an article. I want to say that it was July 25th of this year. And the title of the article says this: Young Earth Creationism destroys the faith of young people. Don't let it. Now, this is a pretty common theme, right? This is nothing new. The claim from a old Earth perspective, whether it be old Earth creationism, somebody who's really focused into ID, whether it be from a theistic evolutionist. This is a pretty common thing, right? To say that somebody who is a young Earth creationist is pushing up so far against the current scientific paradigm that it simply destroys the faith of young people who are very impressionable when they learn one thing in church and then go to college and get a different perspective on things. Okay, so I understand that. I understand where Mr. Rouser is coming from. Mr. Rouser is a good Christian brother who I think is a good defender of the gospel, who does good work. So we agree on very, very much of the topics on which we each write about and speak about. But at the same time, this notion, this whole thing about young earth creationism destroys the faith of young people, it really doesn't make any sense to me. Now, look, there's lots I could say. I could read things from the article. I could read about the claims. I could go, one thing that I do want to point out is he talks about a Twitter response that he got to his sharing an article that he wrote about this. And actually, this article that I'm reading is an article about a Twitter response to another article that he wrote. So there's many layers going on here. But somebody challenged him in response to a commenter on this tweet that he shared out. And this is Joel with the Think podcast, who is evidently a young earth creationist. And he says this, so somebody before that, a user by the name of Darth Calculus, said, discovering that creationism apologetics is rife with pseudoscience has probably destroyed the faith of many good people. And so this Joel character responds with this: or is it the other way around? Is it the churches weren't prepared to present a robust defense of biblical creationism, and students were caught flat-footed by the confidence of their evolutionist biology professors in high school and college? Well, and of course, the rest of the article, as you can imagine, is about Randall's disagreement with this commenter because of the nature of the issue. Now, again, there is a lot that could be said. I do think that this Joel fellow has a pretty good point. I do. And the reason I think he has a pretty good point is because not only do most churches not have any idea about how to present these issues or even how to start talking about these issues, but most apologists and most thinkers who I interact with on this subject, and I really hate to say this, but it's true, just don't understand what young age creationists teach. And I just don't know how to hammer this in any harder. Now, this is not universally true. Of course, there are some who are more well-versed than others and are able to argue, and the young age creationist scientists are able to have those discussions with them. And as with anything, you have to decide whose evidence you think is stronger. But if we're talking about believing what the Bible teaches, and I think the Bible teaches this. Now, people disagree with me and think the Bible doesn't teach this. Well, that's fine. I think the Bible does teach this. I can give reasons for that. And it's just a matter of fact for me personally, anecdotally, that when I talk to people about this, they don't understand. They constantly interpret the claims of young age creationists according to standards that only apply under naturalism or the truth of uniformitarianism. For example, the classic case example of this is somebody says, but there's no evidence of a global flood 4,000 years ago in the fossil record. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, they're of course assuming that the evidence would be found 4,000 years ago via radiometric dates. But if something like a flood took place, the whole point is that it's very likely that what we have from the radiometric dates is not accurate because the rocks are actually younger than what the face value interpretation of that suggests. And again, there's scientific reasons for that. I mean, I'm not just making this stuff up. There's lots that could be said there, but I want to make one overarching point. This is going to be a super short episode for you this week. I really just want to make one overarching point. Please take this away. There's going to be a lot more talking about this, at least from me, in future days, going on a podcast or a YouTube show, a brand new YouTube show later this month with an internet friend of mine, David Paulman. And he just started a YouTube channel. Go check him out, called Faith Because of Reason. And he used to be a young earth creationist. That's what he was brought up as. And he's not a young earth creationist now, but he's very nice, very kind, very gracious, very open to the discussion of young earth creationism. And I think he would possibly even become one again if he was convinced the evidence was strong enough. So, that's for another time, but I'm going to talk to him a little bit about this as well, this notion that I want to get at, this one point that I really want to underscore with respect to this whole thing. Excuse me, the title of his article, Randall Rouser's article, is Young Earth Creationism Destroys the Faith of Young People. Don't let it. Now, here's what I want to know. I want to know this from anybody who agrees with that claim. Where in the Bible do we find that holding to one theological belief, one particular belief about the Bible, is enough to destroy someone's faith? Where do we find that young earth creationism can make an atheist? And how broad does this apply? Does Calvinism destroy the faith of young people? Does Arminianism destroy the faith? Do you see what I'm saying? How do we cash that out? Does the Bible give us any indication about what it means for somebody to be saved, what it means for somebody to be lost? Well, that seems almost like a silly question. Of course it does. Of course it does. The Bible is clear that people are saved because in Adam all die. But in Christ, all, of course, who accept his gift are made alive. In Adam, all die. Nobody will stand before God one day and say, God, I became an atheist, or I stayed an atheist because I just couldn't believe that young earth creationism was true. Now, I guess there is a sense in which that could be the case. There's a sense in which that could be the case. And that could be the case if that is the excuse that they are using to justify in their mind that believing in God is just something they could not do. But again, if that's what they want to do, what they're saying is, not that I don't believe young earth creationism, what they're saying is they truly believe the Bible taught that and they couldn't believe the Bible. They didn't want to believe the Bible. And by not believing in the Bible, they didn't want to believe in God. Here's the thing. If you want to be a Christian, you don't have to be a young earth creationist. I mean, this has been known, for hundreds of years. For goodness sakes, in the conversation I had with Dr. Michael Behe, this came out. The co-discoverer of the theory of evolution was a Christian. I call him the co-discoverer. I don't think he's technically that. Sir Alfred Russel Wallace, I believe was his name, and he had some correspondence with Darwin, etc., but they both kind of came to the same conclusion about the things in the natural world around the same time. Wallace came to the conclusion that God was the master designer who made the whole thing work, and Darwin came to the conclusion that the whole thing could work without God. No surprise whose name we're all more familiar with. Now, do I agree with that person? No. Do I agree with people today who think that evolutionary creationism or something like that is true? I don't. But the point is, you don't have to think that in order to be a Christian, you have to be a young earth creationist. You can be a Christian and not be a young earth creationist, as so many are. So what's the point then? The point then is that you're dealing with somebody who doesn't want to believe the Bible, and young earth creationism becomes an excuse not to believe the Bible. So I'm not going to shy away from teaching my kids young age creationism. However, you better believe that I'm going to teach them the best arguments in favor of the other side. I think there are good arguments in favor of the other side. I'm going to teach them all about the differences, the things that they need to know, how to interpret evidence, how to understand evidence. If they disagree with me, let's have a talk about it. I'm not, if one of them decides to be an evolutionist, I'm not going to be upset with them. I am going to urge them to consider what that means theologically. I think there are implications there, etc. So we're going to have those discussions, but nobody is going to stand before God one day and be justified in their atheism with God because he's a young earth creationist. It's just not going to happen. Young earth creationism doesn't make atheists. A denial of the God of the Bible is what makes atheists. That's it. It's a moral, spiritual problem. If there's intellectual blindness, it's because they are in Adam. It's a moral, spiritual problem. That is the issue. That is the issue. Apologetics can help. Certainly, apologetics can help bring people closer to that point of understanding. It can certainly help with keeping people from wandering away from the faith, and that's where it does come in, that we need to be able to understand how to teach these kinds of things well, how to understand things like young age creationism before we just spout off, claiming that this is specifically the only way that you have to be, or whatever, this is the way that the Bible teaches. We need to be able to come in and give that robust defense of the scientific side of it. But at the end of the day, faith is what God requires. Not faith in the irrational necessarily, but faith in what he says, even when we don't understand. And that's true across the board, but it's also true with this issue. Now, I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback. I know there's going to be people on both sides of this who disagree with me. Some people think I'm not strong enough on this. Some people think I'm too strong on this. I can't make everybody happy, but here's what I can say. Nobody will stand before God justified in their atheism because they were a young earth creationist. And critiques like this from Mr. Rouser seem to completely miss the point here. Completely miss the point. I absolutely agree with the commenter that we need to be able to teach these things more robustly, and it's really hard for somebody to say that they disagree with him when the fact of the matter is that even the people who are supposedly supposed to know and understand these issues and be able to talk about them don't even understand what's going on at all. They're not up on the latest research. They constantly criticize creationists on the basis of decades-old research, and they need to do better if they want to comment on our ideas. All right? Well, I hope that is a little bit helpful for you today. A little bit more of a rant today. I'm sorry about that. I guess I'm just I'm getting a little salty in my old age. But look, I want people to understand what the real issue that the Bible lays before us is, so that we can start doing the groundwork of being more and more effective for Christ. Thanks so much. Hope you have a great week. We'll talk to you next one. Bye-bye.